Hi everyone, welcome to a poker vlog with a bit of a difference. Poker with kids.
Fuck it, let's go. Don't tease me. Let's play some fucking cards.
Something a bit different on the vlog. This time we're going to take a bit of an educational approach and look at the game of Pot LImit Omaha. The ins and outs of the game, how to play it, how to calculate pot size bets, and a few other nuances too with the game of Pot LImit Omaha. Just like Texas Hold'em that you're probably familiar with, Omaha Poker is also a flop-based game. However, in Omaha, players get 4 cards for their starting hand. The big difference between Omaha and Hold'em is that in Omaha, players have to use exactly 2 of their 4 hole cards, and when you get to the community cards, you must use exactly 3 of the community cards combined with 2 of your cards to make the best 5-card hand. Obviously, in this case, over here we have our best hand here, 8s and 2s with an ace kicker. This hand over here, we have a slightly different hand. We actually have 2s full of 4s. So again, using 2 cards from the hand, 3 cards on the board to make their final hand. Here's a little Omaha quiz. If this is your starting hand, you've got 3 3s and a 9 with a suit. In this case, we've got 9 3 of diamonds and 2 black 3s. What are the 3 different board types that you can have to make the nuts with this hand? Let's have a look at the betting in Pot LImit Omaha. I've set up the, obviously just a small game of 4 players, but obviously I have set up with a small blind $1, big blind of $2. And what does it mean to a pot size bet and how do you calculate it? Let's say our first player here decides that he wants to raise by the amount of the pot. How we calculate this is you put in the amount to call, so $2 to call. Then you add up what's in the middle, so you got 5, add that to your bet, and his total bet to raise by the pot is a raise to $7. If, let's say the next player then wants to re-raise by the pot again, you do the same process. So you put in the $7 to call the bet, and then you add up what's in the center. So add up that, you get 17 more. Yeah, add 17 more, and that makes his total bet $24. So relatively straightforward once you get used to it. There are a few little shortcuts in a case where you've got a small blind and big blind, where the big blind is exactly double the small blind. A first initial pot size raise where there are no limpers before that is automatically 7 times the small blinds. In this case of $1 and $2 blinds, 7 times 1, it raises $7. A re-raise, again with no intervening calls, is 12 times the big blind. So 12 times $2, $24. This changes slightly if it gets around to the blinds and it's only amongst the blinds. Now, for the small blind, for example, to raise by the pot, you put in the $2 to the call, then you got $4 to raise on top. So raising by $4 on top, total bet is now $6. So it's only 3 times the big blind. For the big blind then to re-raise, put in the amount to call, so let's make that $6 to call. 6 plus 6 is 12, so we add 12 to our bet for our total of 18. So an easy way to think about that, you have the first initial raise by the small blind is 3 times the big blind, or 6 times the small blind, and the subsequent raise by the big blind is 9 times. Although again, if it's blind and blind, it's again reasonably straightforward to figure out. You might have a slightly different structure to your Pot LImit Omaha games. For example, a number of games I've seen played with 1 and 3 as your blinds. There is a logic to actually doing this. Again, if you think about the initial raise size, someone makes it a pot size raise, put in the $3 to call. The amount that they've got to add is $7, so we add that $7 and change that 5 up. So an initial pot size raise goes from $3 straight to 10. And again, a re-raise, pretty simple to figure out. Put in the 10 to call, we add 24. So adding 24, we have our next raise of 34 as our pot size raise. So you can then change that up for a 25. So that's 34 is a repot in a 1-3 game. So pot first time is 10, a repot 34. Post-flop betting is a little bit different, although again the same principle applies. In this case, we've taken our example as a $20 pot. In this case, let's say the first player here decides to bet the amount of the pot. So they bet $20 as their first bet. This is post-flop, on the flop, on the turn, or on the river. Of course, just because the game is pot limit doesn't mean you have to raise by the full amount of the pot. So for example, let's say our first player does make a full pot size raise and makes it $7. This player might decide to bet less than the maximum that they can bet. In this case, with our calculation that we figured out before, 12 times the big blind would be the maximum, $24. Player could decide to raise, just make it $20, or raise a 13 on top of the initial bet, again, which is perfectly acceptable. It's just the limit and the maximum that someone can bet, not that you have to bet to the pot limit. In the same way that in a no-limit game, you can bet any amount underneath what your entire stack is. You can potentially bet your entire stack, but you don't have to bet your entire stack all at once. If our first pot size bet $20 and our next player wants to re-raise by the pot, you do the same mechanics again. Put in your initial bet of $20, add up what's in the center, $60. So add that to there. So that makes it an $80 bet. One way to figure it out, again, if your initial pot is 20 or whatever your amount is, obviously that's your initial pot. A re-raise is going to be 4 times the initial pot size. The pot, the initial bet, the call, and then that's 3 times the bet. So altogether, 4 times the initial pot. So that would be $80 bet as a re-raise by the pot. Let's break down an example of 4 different random starting hands and how they work in Omaha. The one thing to think about in Omaha is that you effectively have 6 different hold'em hands to play with. So let's look at our first hand. This is actually be a much better hand for a different variation of Omaha called Omaha High-Low. However, if you look at the combination of cards, it's really got 2 playable hands. So you have, for example, Ace Queen offsuit as one of your 2 card combinations, very playable hand. You also got Ace 3 suited. Again, because it's a suited hand, you can make obviously a spade flush there, and obviously with the Ace of Spades, you're going to have the nut flush. So very useful to have those 2 combinations of cards. However, they're not the only combinations that you have. You also have Ace 2 offsuit. Not the best, but maybe you could argue that it's playable. You also have 2 3 offsuit. Not very playable at all. You also have Queen 2 offsuit. Again, as a hold'em hand, not that playable at all. And also Queen 3 offsuit. So although this hand does have some playability with the Ace 3 suited and the Ace Queen for high card value, as a whole, not actually that good a hand. Our next hand here, again, we have our 6 combinations. So we have Ace 9 offsuit, marginal hand, probably not that playable. Much the same, Ace 7 offsuit, also Ace 3 offsuit. Reg Ace is not that great. Also, no hearts to go with the Ace of Hearts to make a flush, so not that great. Let's look at some other combinations. We've also got the 3, could go with the 7. So you do have the potential for a flush in diamonds, however, it's only going to be a 7 high flush. So obviously a very vulnerable flush if you do make a flush. Also lots of potential to get in trouble if you make a flush and your opponent makes a higher flush. 3-9 offsuit, again, not really a very playable hand. And 9-7 offsuit. You could argue maybe some vague connectedness there, but again, not a suited hand, so you're losing some of that value by not being able to make a flush. So again, put them all together as an Omaha hand, not really that playable. Here we've got something interesting where we have 3 diamonds. You might think that that's good in some ways, but if you think about it, you can only ever use 2 of those. So rather than in a normal situation where you'd have 2 of a suit and you're drawing to 11 remaining cards, in this case, because you've got 3 of a suit, you can only use 2 of them, and you're actually only drawing to 10 cards. So you've actually reduced the odds of making a flush. So we call this having a blocker to hand. In this case, it's actually your own hand, the fact that you've got 1 less diamond to draw to. Let's look at our combinations. We have King 8 suited, King High flush draw, reasonable. Again, it's only going to be beaten by the Ace. King and 8, not that connected, can't make a straight, so from that sense, not that great, but the fact that they are suited, useful. King 6, suited value is like King 8, however, because you're taking away one of your outs, you can no longer, you've only got 10 outs rather than 11, this actually takes away from the value of the hand. King 4 offsuit is Hold'em hand, not that playable at all, and again, if you think about it, 8-4 offsuit, not that playable again. 6-4, vaguely connected, but again, not suited. 6-8 suited, maybe you could argue that that's a reasonable hand, but there's only one reasonable hand when you've got 6 different variants to play with. So again, this hand, not really a playable Omaha hand at all. And our next of our 4 random hands to look at. With our next hand, Jack 7 of clubs. It is suited, so it is good to make a flush. However, it's only going to be the Jack high flush, so not the nuts. And if you think about the connectedness, Jack 7, there's only one possibility to make straight. You need 8, 9, 10 on the board, and that's not going to be to the nuts. So reasonable, but not the best. Jack 2 offsuit, hardly a playable Hold'em hand. Jack 10 offsuit. Interesting, Jack 10 is a really interesting hand in itself, in that if you do make a straight with the Jack 10, it's always going to be the nut straight, assuming that the Jack or 10 aren't on the board. So, for example, you could have Ace, King, Queen with a Jack 10, makes again Broadway. You could go all the way down to the other end, where you have 7, 8, 9, and again you make a Jack high straight, which is going to be the nuts. If you think about any other straight involving Jack 10 where those Jack 10 aren't on the board, it's always going to be nuts. So Jack 10 is actually a very, very useful hand, particularly in a game like Omaha, where you're looking to make hands bigger than just one pair. But again, that is only one combination that you've made out of this hand. Let's have a look at some of the other combinations. We've got 10-7 offsuit, vaguely connected, but again, not suited, not that great. 10-2 offsuit, hardly a great hand unless you're Dor Brunson and can win the World Series with it. And do 7 offsuit, not much good unless you're playing the do 7 game and you can get some extra money running a bluff. So with the doom and gloom about those previous 4 hands, what does a really strong Omaha hand look like? Here's what I've set up. Obviously, pocket aces, we can all recognise that from Hold'em. Fantastic hand, the best 2-card starting hand you can have, the biggest pair you can start with, so obviously a very good hand. Also, you'll notice that both of the aces are suited, so again, you're drawing to the ace high flush in hearts, ace high flush in spades, so that's another ace 10 is a combination, ace jack is another combination, so they're both 2 useful combinations that you'll have. Some other combinations that you have here, we also have Jack 10 offsuit. We talked about that previously, that Jack 10, if it makes a straight, is always going to be a straight to the nuts. So that's going to be a very useful hand as well. So we've already got 4 good combinations. If you think about Ace Jack offsuit, reasonable combination. Again, it gives you another variation of making Broadway as a straight. Also, again, possibly a top 2 pair type of hand. And again, by the same token, Ace 10 offsuit. Again, another reasonably strong hand, good high card value. So a hand like this, excellent starting hand in Omaha. Another type of hand that's useful in Omaha is one like this. This one's what we call a rundown hand. Obviously, one thing that you notice at the start, we've got 2 diamonds, 2 clubs. So again, we're drawing to a flush. Even though they're not the nut flush, still useful to have 2 suited cards to make a flush. Again, as you find, generally flushes are difficult to make. You always have to have 3 of the same card on the board. So obviously not that many other cards out there. Occasionally you'll see flush over flush, but it's not that common in Omaha. Also, in particular, if you have what we call a backdoor flush, where the flush cards come with 1 on the flop and then coming on the turn in the river, this is where a hand can be a bit more disguised than something like, for example, if you had a board where clubs came on the turn and river after only 1 on the flop, less likely that people with a club draw would stay in from the flop. So this is where this hand could make a flush and actually be a winning flush. One of the reasons that this hand's so useful is if you add, for example, Jack 10, you've automatically got yourself straight. You can also have the same thing at the end, other end, 5-4. Any combination in between that, so for example, if we throw in, if you make a pair out of these hands, so let's say we throw in an 8 with our 5-4, all of a sudden you've got straight to the 8. Let's say we add a 6 with our 5-4, again, we've got our straight to the 8. Let's say you had the 5 and you added 2 pair on board. So we've got 9-8, again, adding our 6-7 to make a straight. So if you make pairs on the board and you've got cards on either side, very easy to make a straight. And again, with the double suited nature, clubs and diamonds there as a flush possibility. Hopefully the first answer of the 3 is pretty obvious. In this case, if we have a board like this with 3 9s on board and any 2 other cards that are either not a pair higher than a 9 or are not able to make a straight flush with the cards remaining, in this case, you're again going to have the nuts with quad 9s with a 3 kicker. The second hand becomes obvious if you think about it a little. When we're talking about a hand like this where we have 4 2s on board and a 3. In this case, you can only use 3 cards from the board. So in this case, the nuts is going to be 3s full of 2s. Nobody's going to have quads because you can only use 3 of those cards on the board, not 4 of those cards. And any other hand that you might have on this board, for example, the one we talked about earlier with ace, ace, jack 10 double suited, they can only use 3 cards from the board. So that would be 2s full of aces, in which case our 3s full of 2s would win the hand. So this is our second board where this hand 9-3-3-3 makes the nuts. And again, our final hand is another one that, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense. If you have a royal flush on the board, unlike Hold'em where you can just say I'm playing the board, again in Omaha you must use 3 cards from the board, 2 cards from your hand. So ace, king, queen from the board with the 9-3 of the suit. Again, the next card from the 10 is a 9, so there's no other flush that can beat higher than this one with ace, king, queen, 9. If you're wondering about the chips I'm using, I actually got these set recently from Jack's Poker in Sydney. It's a new set they've released called the Mint set. Got a fair range. I've got 25 cent, dollar chip, $5, 25, 100, 500, 1,000 and 5,000 is your denominations for your chips. Really nice looking set, really good looking chips, really bright and vibrant and colourful, and the denominations are nice and easy to read and they really stand out. But they also don't have some of the corny names you might see with some of the other poker chip sets going around. So I really like this set, and if you're looking for some poker chips, I'd definitely recommend Jack's as a place to check out. That's going to wrap up my brief introduction to Pot LImit Omaha. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, learned a few things along the way, and maybe even did well on that little quiz that I gave you. Also, hopefully that'll give you the confidence to play some Omaha games yourself, and I might also try to incorporate some Omaha games in the vlog in future. As usual, thanks for watching. Don't forget the like and subscribe buttons that you can click underneath this video, and feel free to come back for some more Poker with Kids in the future. Thanks.